Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the 1994 Michael Jordan basketball cards, the main set cards. And the reason I put this list together is because for a while I've been thinking about doing a list of ranking Michael Jordan cards in each year. But I figured I'd do that kind of like off at the end because I wanted to go ahead and continue with this whole if I do the Jordan cards, then do I also have to do any other players? Even though the Jordan cards are kind of special, I just felt like that would be a whole nother subject or a whole another series to do after I've already gone through the main card set phases. That was until 1994, and as I was working on the 1994 rankings, it dawned on me that the Jordan cards are very special because he didn't play in 1993, so there were no player cards for him to be made for him in 1994. So that meant that we were going to have a whole year without Michael Jordan, which we were bracing for. And then he came back toward the end of the season, which meant that late release sets and Series 2 sets had the opportunity to bring him into the fold, to go ahead and tack a card on for Michael Jordan, and a number of card sets took exactly that opportunity. But not just that, the cards are actually quite special. So that's what makes these cards so cool, is the fact that they really took the opportunity to put some energy into making great cards. And so this was so unique, especially for this year, that I figured let's go ahead and put together a ranking where we look at these awesome cards. And the whole top 5 cards are exactly this. That's what I just described. Although one's not truly an insert or a regular set card, but it's close enough, I'm going to count it. But there are 2 to 3 other cards that I also need to include in here that actually did appear in the set, actually within the set. And so those cards, they are more like honorable mentions, not because they're in a different category, but just because they're not as good of cards, especially where we're starting with Collector's Choice. And with Collector's Choice, this is a card set that has never really been very big on great design. It's just not. And in this case, well, not just design, but image selection. And unfortunately, this Jordan card is very much the same. This was intended to be a tribute card looking back at this great legend that we were never going to see on a basketball court again. That was the idea. In fact, on the card, it doesn't even have a position on it because it's not about him as a player, it's about him as a legend. And so they wanted to have a big portrait on the front, which is fine if you have a big portrait type image. And this just isn't that. This is a card that is this is an image that's very mundane. I mean, Jordan cards, it's not like you have to work to find a bad shot, but it's so easy to get great shots of Michael Jordan. You wonder, why did they settle on this particular shot? Is this really all they had to work with? I hope it's not. But because there's no position logo on it, the Collector's Choice logo is not very prominent. And so the card, to me, looks more like the 1991-92 Upper Deck All-Star Checklist card, which looks very similar. The All-Star Checklist card, I think, looks better. It's more engaging. This one is just kind of lackluster. That said, I love the image on the card back. The whole jersey retirement card, or retirement image, that is a great piece of the whole Michael Jordan collection. I love that. But when you got to turn the card over and look at the back to see anything that's worthwhile, that's not a good sign. But that wasn't the only card that Collector's Choice made, because they also made one for him as a baseball prospect. And again, the card just doesn't really bring anything. I mean, okay, this looks like a prospect card. The prospect cards don't usually have as much richness to the image options, the image selection, as we see with pros. So it looks very much like just another prospect. But I really, it's Michael Jordan. You got to have at least some baseball images that are strong. And this one certainly is not. It's just run of the mill. So, yeah, Collector's Choice wasn't exactly hitting it out of the park. But that wasn't the only card set the Upper Deck did with Michael Jordan, because they also did SP Championship, which again is kind of a cheap card. It's a cheap version of SP. And this is a card set I've never been a fan of. When I was collecting, I did I did notice the design feature on it, but only slightly. Otherwise, this is a card set that I did put together back in 1995, and I think it was 95 when I finished it. And I don't even remember it. I mean, this is a card where I remember, oh yeah, SP Championship, and then I can't remember what the card looks like. That's a problem both of the cards and of the images on the card. And the Jordan card is no different. This is a card where obviously there's no design feature on it. Well, actually there is. It has the He's Back design on it, which always throws me off because for Upper Deck they have a whole set of He's Back. And this card's not a part of it, even though it looks like it's supposed to be a part of it. And so every time I look at it, I got to remember, wait, was that or was that separate? It was separate. It's the design feature on it, but that's kind of the strength, because the image is just another random run-of-the-mill big cluttered mess. You can see him on it, but he's not prominent on it. SP Championship, for whatever reason, they didn't bother to do work to make the player stand out, and this is just another Jordan card that's just kind of there. But fortunately, when we move on to number 5, we move on to the actual list of the top 5. Now we're actually moving to a card that's worthwhile, which is Finest. And top of that, this card, I love the image. Not the best image in the world, but for this card, it's the best image for this card. Now, I will say, the card sucks. I've never liked 94-95 Finest basketball. I mean, granted, I don't like 95-96 either, and this is better than 95-96, but that's not hard. The problem is the card is just very subdued. The gray is kind of bleak, and the design features don't really glow. Even when you remove the peel, it doesn't help all that much. The card just has not a depressed feeling, but it has kind of that foggy day feeling to it. For me, it loses the punch, the pop that I would like for a Finest card to have. But they do have the right image for Jordan, because that big red jersey is so strong and so prominent, and there's such a richness to the red. The position is pretty good. Not a great image, but for this card, it's pretty good because it fits within the confines of a card that is kind of compressing. You kind of get that telephone booth kind of a look where he's scrunched in there with the ball in this smaller space. So he actually fits with the whole pattern of the way the card itself, the actual card, looks. So I like how it comes across, and I'd have it higher on the list, except I don't like the Finest design. Which is an ironic thing to say, because when I move over to number 4, it's the exact opposite with Emotion. And Skybox Emotion is a card set I really like. I mean, some of these cards are just phenomenal, and some of the cards are big disappointments as only pretty good. But that's the thing. This is a card set where just about everything is above average. Or maybe at average. I'll give you that. Because the card design itself is so well crafted in terms of not anything intricate or fancy or special. It is a big, bold statement, and that's all it wants to be, and it's all that it needs to be. And so with the Jordan card, here you get to see the Emotion design that works pretty well, but the image itself is kind of awkward. It doesn't have any of the spirit of Michael that you're used to. For the most part, the image of him in his leadership role isn't all that great. I mean, you can swing over to Joe Dumars and see a much better shot of pretty much the same thing. This is a card that absolutely nails it. And I mean, you can see that there are a lot of cards in the set that really do have the energy, and there's a feeling to it that's awesome that the Jordan card just doesn't have. This is a card where whenever I look at the Jordan card, all I think is that's the best shot you could come up with. But then I could say that about Collector's Choice. I could say that about SP Championship. But in the case of this one, you know, it's better than in the other ones because there's more energy. It's just that every time I look at it, it doesn't feel right to me. It feels like this card is supposed to be spectacular, and it is absolutely not. And that's too bad. When I move over to number 3, we can get more back into the flow of a card that's actually done right, which is the Topps Embossed card. And in the case of Topps Embossed, this is a card where I love the card itself. It's not one of the greatest cards in history, but it's close enough to that. I would actually say that, because I love the color of the orange of the basketball. I love the black for the seams, and I love the texturing, and the fact that all three of those come together so well is great. Does a great job of framing the card inside, and inside you have Jordan once again in not the best shot ever, but not a bad shot. A lot of red is coming through, so it's got that punch to it. And if the image in the card was a little bit more dynamic, I'd feel a lot more, I'd like it a whole lot more. It's not bad, it is more than serviceable, but it's not a spectacular card. And that's because the card is he is too narrow on the card, it's too centered, it's too balanced. I need to have more lateral movement, I need to see more of him. All of those things are missing, which is all what we saw way back on Finest. Here again, they don't quite have it, but still, that's not enough to diminish the strength of the card and the strength of him being on it. So I really like that, but it could be a lot better. And at number 2, I have the exception on this list, which is SP, where these are SP cards in the SP release. These cards are both a whole lot better, which they absolutely should be, because they are basically standalone inserts. But what I love about it, and the reason I have it here, is that this is the same design as the main set. They just fixed it. In the main set, what you get is a card with gold foil on the side, which is way too powerful. It all kind of runs together. And now here with Jordan, you have the richness of the red, and you have the gold foil as an accent off of that. This is something they'd actually do in baseball in 1995. Here with the Jordan card, they're doing it in a way that makes it look like this entire card was originally designed for the Bulls, especially when you look at the black text on the card, which is just standard. The way that ruby red comes through is gorgeous, and the image is actually not bad, because it's got him in an action shot with that screw it, I'll do it myself mentality to it. That's the way it looks. You got the open space on one side, and they wisely shoved all of the players who are against him in behind the background, so it allows him to kind of move from the background outward, which is actually brilliant planning. It's like somebody sat down and said, okay, for this one card, I want to take the time to actually think it through. They thought it through, and they aced it. Love how it comes across. But not just that, they also have a parallel, which is not die cut. Instead, it's a silver triangle with a speckled gold holofoil on the outside, which gives a liveliness to it. Doesn't look as good, but it looks like an amazing parallel that you want to get anyway, because even if it's not as luxurious, it's a lot more energetic. And the contrast between the two is great. The pairing of them is phenomenal. This is a card that I am very much a fan of, mainly the main one. But it doesn't hold a candle to number 1, which is obviously Flair. And this card, I mean, this is a card that if I was put together a list of the top 10, maybe even the top 5 all-time most amazing looking cards, you better believe this is the first one I'm going to put on the list. And I have no idea what else I would put on it, because this card is the only one that is so obvious that you would basically put together that list just to have some place to put it. It's too incredible. This is Flair at its best. Hands down, Flair at its absolute best. It's got the 2 images, but the 2 images are not competing with one another. The front image is very clear, very straightforward, very bold with the red. The way that he's positioned is perfect, so that the faded image in the back, he's looking the other direction. You know it's 2 separate players, but at the same time, they're also very separate on the card. They feel different. And so you get that echo, you get that ghost of his legendary career behind the player who is now coming back into the league, or however you want to look at it. Just looks gorgeous. And it's another one of those cases where you look and you just go, why is this the only card that Fleer bothered to actually focus on making amazing? I'm glad they did, but that's kind of the way that a lot of these cards were. They wanted to tack on another Michael Jordan card at the end, and so they went in and they made a card that had a little bit more passion put into it. And they had a different kind of pop to other cards in the set. They may not be the best looking card in the set, but usually they're up toward the front, if not at the front. So that's what I like about these cards, at least the top 5 cards for Michael Jordan in 1994. So that is my list. I'm right in the middle of doing my list of best and worst basketball card or sports card designs of 1994. I've already done worst of, and now I'm on to best of. So if you haven't gone and watched those videos, I do urge you to do so. Do subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you very much for watching.